Starting off with what the president had to say, one of the issues that the president was questioned on was the issue of the country's resources. Well, the president said the country's financial resources have been depleted. He's calling for a national discussion regarding the use of pension funds. This is what he has to say.
And we now need to have this discussion, including with the pension fund industry in our country, in the insurance fund industry, and have a broad and wholesome discussion. And I would encourage all those who've got views to come forward with their views. We are faced with a situation where our financial resources have been depleted. And we are facing a situation where our developmental needs are enormous. And in a number of other places, pension funds funding is utilized for developmental purposes, for infrastructure, and quite often those pension funds make good returns out of infrastructure development. So I am saying now that let's have that discussion. Let it be a national discussion. And thereafter, as a nation, we arrive at a conclusion that, yes, there is efficacy in utilizing resources to whatever extent to ensure that we enhance development.
Well, President Ramaphosa also said there are no quick solutions to low growth as well as high employment in the country.
Business and labor need to act together to promote our country's national strategic objectives. Early in the 6th administration, I engaged with the National Planning Commission to tap into the collective wisdom embodied in that esteemed collective of South Africans. In playing their advisory role, the National Planning Commission continues to develop research and insights to support strategies towards inclusive growth. There are no easy or quick solutions to low growth and unemployment.
Well, for some analysis, we're joined in studio now by political analyst Karima Brown. Karima, always a pleasure to have you.
Nice to have you.
Well, we're looking at some of those issues that have been deliberated on. Let's start off with this issue around the utilizing of pension funds and also tapping into the private sector in terms of how is it that we can use these pension funds for the infrastructural development of the country. But one thing comes into mind, ding, 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 the PIC inquiry, which you're currently seeing.
Yeah, look, for people who have difficulty in understanding what prescribed assets are, it's just a term to essentially say that a percentage of savings of government employees must be invested in government-issued bonds and in state-owned companies. Now, of course, when you say that against the background of the corruption at state-owned companies, everyone gets really nervous. And as you say, if you look at the PIC, then you get nervous. But here's the other question. This matter comes up as the country faces a complete economic meltdown and the possibility of junk status, and more importantly, Faith, going to international donor agencies like the International Monetary Fund. And of course, when you go to institutions like that, many people argue that you actually give up your sovereignty as a country to determine your economic development path. So yesterday, for example, the ANC's head of economic transformation, Enoch Godongwana, said that the ANC is discussing the possibility of prescribed assets and using it. And of course, today the DA wanted a direct yes or no from the president. And what the president did is what he always does, is he says, let's talk as a country, because there are obviously different views about this. Business will have a view, Labour will have a view. And he referred to the fact that COSATU actually supports this. And there are many economists who support this as well. The key issue for the government, though, is do they go the route of prescribed assets, and how do they prevent that people's pensions are not abused by corruption, as we saw with state capture that rendered almost all the state entities useless? What will a policeman or a nurse have when they retire, because it's their money essentially? Or do they go the route of going to the IMF, who will then take the economic decision-making out of the hands of the executive and South Africans and tell us precisely how to do this? The history of institutions such as the IMF on continents like the African continent isn't a good one. Yeah. It hardly ever advances the position of the poor. So it is a debate. It's not a settled matter, not even in the governing party for that matter. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what a minister like Ibrahim Patel does when the discussions are going to be happening now around AGOA and of course in the G20 because there is a global trade war that's going on. So the option that we choose is very, very critical because it relates to the kind of economic path that we want to go. But either way, the state will have to guarantee that it can manage the decision that it's taking. And I think the jury's out on whether they can manage it because of the history of corruption in the very recent past and, of course, way back before even the democratic breakthrough. And then on the side of the IMF, the question is, if we go that route, what happens to jobs when austerity kicks in? So it's a tough discussion, but it's a necessary discussion because we are at the precipice. Our economy is in deep, deep trouble, Faith.
So on the one side, our economy is in deep, deep trouble, but on the other side, we're talking about how is it that we can actually reduce the civil servants' wage bill, right? However, at the back of the civil servants' wage bill is the need for actually primary health care. So we need to actually hire more police. We need to hire more doctors. We need people within the health professional services who are able to attend to various needs because, as the President alluded to, the fact that actually when it comes to healthcare in this country particularly, it's failing. And never mind what's happening within the policing side of it, we've seen the rise of gangsterism and police and killings that are happening, some 42 even in one weekend.
Absolutely. The funny thing is the bill for public servants must be reduced, but there are 50,000 nurses required. According to the recent summit that we had when we discussed the National Health Insurance Scheme. So we require 50,000 nurses. There are 64,000 vacancies in the South African police. So when you're talking about reducing the civil servants service, how do you speak about that when you have those kinds of numbers jumping out at you at frontline services? But here's the question. Should ministers be paid what they are earning? Should you get an extra additional salary when you a chair of a committee in Parliament on top of your parliamentary salary? Should we give ESCOM managers who can't keep the lights on bonuses? So there is a way in which you can actually cut the fat. It depends where you cut the fat and it depends how you reprioritize. But in order to do that, Faith, you have to negotiate. So you'll have to tell a teacher, I'm going to freeze your salary because I need to build a classroom. But then you need commitment that the classroom that's going to be built is not going to go through a corrupt tender process where you continue to have pit latrines and classes that don't get built and children who sit under schools, so that the teacher can actually get to understand that. You have to tell the policeman or woman that I'm going to freeze your salary because I'm actually going to train you on how to deal with gender-based violence so that you don't re-victimize a survivor that comes and lays a complaint because we need services for that. So you need a social compact. You need people to put themselves in each other's shoes. And in order to do that, you need trust. You need trust in the system. You need trust in the president. You need trust in the political elite. And at the moment, ordinary South Africans are fed up with the political elite. We saw when it came to the issue of money, this was supposed to be the president's big litmus test today. How is he going to answer and get out of the hole of, the CR17 campaign money? And he got out of it easily by reminding people that if he's going to be subjected to intra-party funding scrutiny, then the EFF must open their books as well. Now, here's the interesting thing. When Mmusi Maimane contested Wilmot James for the position of leader of the Democratic Alliance, Wilmot James funded his own campaign and he opened his books because he believed in transparency. We're still waiting for the leader of the official opposition, Mmusi Maimane, to tell us who in the DA or in business backed him against Wilmot James for that presidency. So as much as we need answers from the CR17 campaign, we also need answers from Mmusi Maimane, we need answers from every other political party. And the president actually threw the gauntlet down today and say, let us discuss here in Parliament if we extend the bill on party political funding that doesn't cover intra-party funding, which means internal contests. Let's see if that is what we need to extend. But then remember, it's not just going to apply to me, it's going to apply to all of us. And we saw, of course, Mr. Shivambu up on his feet. I don't know whether he was trying to assure the CIC that he wasn't going to contest or that he's not building a war chest to do exactly that. But I think the president was able to deflect that question because the political elite in South Africa is afraid of scrutiny. It took us many, many years to get the bill that is now an act on the table that will actually regulate party political funding. Now the next step is, in fact, to see how intra-party funding happen, because it's not just those who seek the office of president. In some instances, in the ANC, for example, NEC members have campaign managers for just becoming a member of the National Executive Committee to sit in a position where they can influence. So South Africans deserve greater transparency on party political funding.
South Africans deserving a maturing democracy where those political elites are able to answer some of that. You and I can talk all day about what happened, exactly what transpired, but we have to leave our conversation, unfortunately. Karima, always a pleasure speaking to you.
Lovely to speak.
We're going to be continuing, but we're going to take a quick break and we'll see you after this.